So let's now talk about the sort of three main modalities of working in AI ethics consulting. And again, this is a biased view, but from my experience, there's sort of three main things that you'll be doing, or categories of things that you'll be doing, that really form the backbone or the core of what it means to be a consultant in AI ethics and AI governance and emerging tech in general. And these sort of foundational modes, as I'm going to call them, are, first one is spotting risks due to the use of AI or any emerging technology. And so most of what we do is come in, look at an algorithmic system, let's say, or the socio-technical system in which it's embedded, and we say, what are the core risks here? What can happen? What can go wrong? And this is of interest, of course, not just to the client, but it's the main sort of motivation for me to even go into this field. And so there are a variety of kinds of risks. There's ethical risks. There's safety risks. It could be that AI may cause some safety issues. There's compliance risk, which is, of course, something that clients are worried about and interested in. And there's also reputational risks. And as we saw from the last lecture, or if you just open any news website, all the time AI is getting people into trouble, people meaning corporations. And so there's significant reputational risk that needs to be mitigated. So just spotting these risks is really important. But then we have to find solutions, like how do we actually mitigate these risks? And this requires mostly a lot of research. And so research in general is something that you're going to be doing a lot of as a consultant. And no matter what your niche is and where you put your focus, you always have to be continually doing research, checking your own assumptions, and finding supporting evidence. And finally, once you come up with a best practice or you've discovered a solution, you have to communicate this. You have to communicate this to the client, and you have to help the client communicate this to the relevant stakeholders. And in general, communication and effective communication is something that you're going to have to be using a lot as a client, and including in the research process, interviewing, writing to people, and this is something that you have to be doing a lot. So these three things, which are really broad, I'll admit, these are very broad, but I can't overstate how important they are. They really form the necessary foundation for being an effective consultant. Because if I can find somebody who is able to spot risks, so if they can come into a situation, they can analyze that situation and immediately start recognizing the potential for risks. And of course, they might have to do some research. There's always learning to be done, but the ability to spot those risks is critically important. And if they can research solutions and then communicate those solutions, that's hugely valuable. And just those three alone are very, very valuable. And I'd say they go in sort of decreasing order of difficulty and scarcity. So what I mean is spotting risks, the ability to spot risks associated with AI, takes a lot of knowledge. You have to have that knowledge at your fingertips. And I'm going to go into more detail about this in the next lecture. But you have to have that knowledge at your fingertips, and you have to be able to analyze a situation and sort of forecast to potential negative outcomes. And that's not easy to do. And so it's harder to find people who are able to do that. And then research, that's something that is you can find people who are good at research. It's a lot easier to do that. Most academics are pretty good at tracking down evidence and investigating a new field and really trying to find a solution to something. And then finally, communication. While communication is probably the most scary thing for people in any field, and it's something that every field requires the ability to communicate effectively, it's still really, really important. But you can find a lot of people who have perfected that. And so those three core modalities are all really, really important, but they go in decreasing order of difficulty and scarcity. And it's important to exercise your ability to operate in these three modes. And so even though really technical specific skills are going to be important, and I'm going to talk about that next, I can't overstate the value of practicing and actively practicing those three skills, those three sort of main modalities of working, which make up, of course, there's a variety of skills you need to be able to operate in those modes. So there are also other specialized modes. So there's a lot of specialized tasks and ways of working that you're going to encounter in emerging tech and AI ethics and governance. Some of these are really specific for AI, and some are just more general. So if you are a consultant, or if you in your other professional activities, you would have sort of exercised and gained these skills. Conducting interviews, so the ability to extract information from people quickly and efficiently and pleasantly. That's an important skill. So being able to talk to people and get them to open up and get information out of them so that you can find solutions. That's really important. Bias testing. So that's a really technical thing. So the ability to test an algorithm, which, for my purposes right now, I don't care if they're AI, it's just input, output, being able to test for bias along a whole range of protected category classes. This is something that's fairly technical, but it's something that can be taught and can be developed. Constructing and giving surveys. This is something that, again, it's part of the research and gathering evidence and gathering insights. Working with stakeholders, so stakeholder mapping and engaging with stakeholders. This is something that happens that we promote in our firm. We encourage our clients to do, and we have to often do that for our clients or on behalf of our clients. And so being able to work and gather stakeholders and includes lots of empathy, a lot of insight, a lot of what we'd call soft skills. There's legal research. So there might be some of you out there who are lawyers or have worked in law, and legal research is something that we often have to do. And it's not always lawyers that are doing it. It's sort of ordinary consultants in the process of trying to find solutions or support the risks that they think they have identified and make sure that they're actually identifying real risks in terms of legal risk. User experience research. So a lot of what happens with AI is that you're interacting with the computer, with an algorithm in some way, and that user experience has a lot of implications. And so being able to identify sort of core principles in user experience and how they relate to AI and AI ethics is quite important and something that we do. And related to that is sort of explainable machine learning research and development. So having the right to an explanation is something which has sort of been encoded in law recently, and it's also sort of a best practice, and the ability to extract the reasons why an algorithm made a particular decision. Although it's not really making decisions, or hopefully not making decisions, it's just providing some sort of probability typically. But being able to understand sort of what variables were really important in that decision, that's something that explainability research and machine learning is important, and we need to understand that as consultants, and often we have to do that. Teaching and presenting. So sometimes you have to actually teach a client in order to get them to effectively incorporate your solution. So if you found a way of mitigating harm due to AI or other kinds of risks in an organization, a lot of that centers around transferring knowledge and getting people to understand the risks and understand how to mitigate those risks. And so teaching and giving presentations, that's something that is a task and a mode of working that you're going to be doing a lot of. there's straight up machine learning research. So it's really important to understand in a field that's evolving so quickly, what are the new innovations that are happening. And not only that, you have to absorb those new innovations and then be able to understand potential risks associated with that. And the risks could be associated with the technical parts of the algorithm and the way they're, let's say, trained, or the ways in which they could potentially be used for good or for ill. So keeping up with the machine learning research and occasionally doing machine learning research, it's important to actually, I think it's important to understand how neural networks work and the different kinds of machine learning and the different kinds of AI, and actually have experimented with them enough that you can really have a cogent conversation with a developer and be able to talk with the same terms and in their language to effectively communicate. And then I put etc., which just means there's a lot more. And so if, in particular, a lot of you out there who are listening are active consultants and have probably worked in this field at least a little bit. And so if you have experience and if there are things that I've missed that you think are critically important, put them in the comments. Let's make this a conversation, because there are a lot of sort of specialized skills. And if you have one of these skills, then it really adds to that foundation and allows you to operate effectively as a consultant. Most of these tasks, or not most, some of these tasks require sort of a greater level of expertise. So you might have actually had formal training, so university courses or certificate courses in some of these things. But it's important for me to emphasize that you don't need to be an expert at any of these, but you should be sort of a specialist in at least one of them in order to find your place in this field. You should feel comfortable putting yourself in at least one of those bins, and the more the better in terms of being generally proficient in the field. But you don't have to be an expert in any one of them. In fact, you just have to be fairly good at least one of them, and then you're going to be able to find work. You're going to be able to find things and ways that you can bring value. And the important thing to realize, again, this is just from my experience, at least at BABL, you're going to be part of a team. And so you're typically going to have people who have specialization. So here you might have somebody who focuses on bias in machine learning. You might have a legal expert, an ethicist, somebody who really just focuses on the moral issues. Maybe an engineer, a person who's going to be able to translate between the ethicist and the engineering team. And you might just have an intern, somebody who's assisting to do some of those little things which are difficult and time consuming. So you're going to be part of a team, and that's important. And so you finding your place in that team is going to be even more important, and knowing your role and knowing where you can really contribute the most. But it's also a safety net. It's more than just your set of eyes looking at the problem. And so even if you're flying solo, I really encourage you to double down on your sort of unique perspective and the value that perspective brings. So even if you're planning on being just an individual solo consultant, your perspective and having a unique perspective is going to be important. So knowing what your strengths are and really knowing what value they bring, including your individual sort of personal perspective, that's going to be where you're going to find your success. Knowing where it is. Don't try to do everything. Just say, I can do this particular thing really, really well, and you have a problem there, I can solve that problem. And knowing the kind of problems that you can solve, that's where we're going to find a lot of your success. And so next up, we're going to talk specifically about spotting risks and how important that is.